Okay, greetings everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Mojave Roadhouse. Um, my name is John Grasson. I'm your host for today for Perceivable for Future. Today we got a really cool guest. Today our guest is going to be Bryon Harrington, who wrote the book about Campo and the lost Forgotten Gunfight. Um, he's I don't know really how to explain it. He's a really good guy. He does reenactments for Old West stuff, and we've known each other for years. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Bryon in, and then Bryon can kind of explain everything for us. Bryon, how you doing?
Hey, John, I'm doing good.
Um, Basically, this is something if it's forgotten, not a lot of people know about. So if you can, let's start with kind of the backstory, where you are, where it's located, and what happened.
Okay, we are out here in Campo, California. Now, Campo is about 50 miles east of San Diego on the Mexican border. It's on the American side. Campo was settled in the 1850s. 1860s, the Gaskill brothers, Lumen and Silas Gaskill, bought the small store that was already here in Campo, and they were here until 1896 when they sold the stone store, which is right behind me. Right here, I have to get back a ways. You won't be able to see it. Now, this store was built in 1885, excuse me, by the Gaskill brothers, and it's pretty much a fort. The walls are 4 foot thick on the bottom floor, 2 foot thick on the top floor, and they successfully did a lot of business here until they moved on. But the significance of Campo and the Campo gunfight, Campo has a lot of other historical things than that. But in 1875, a gang of Californios bandidos was chased out of Central and Northern California by posses. And they crossed the border into Mexico to get the posses off of their trail. And they decided that they were going to move on down to Sonora, Mexico, and rob some gold miners down there. They were real good at hitting the 49ers up north. And they decided, seeing winter was coming on, that they needed some supplies and things. And they were in Tecate, Mexico, which was called Tecate in them days. And they had heard that just across the border, 10 miles away, was this little town of Campo, where these two gringo brothers, Lumen and his brother Silas, owned a store, blacksmith shop, and a cattle ranch. And they figured that'd be easy pickings because these banditos have been raiding and killing Californians for years. Originally started with Joaquin Murrieta, and there is a loose connection between the Campo bandits and Joaquin Murrieta. But it was Tiburcio Vasquez who made the bandits famous. In 1870, Tiburcio started up his own gang of Californios Bandidos, and he started raiding and killing the miners and settlers of California. And in 1873, he robbed the town of Tres Pinos, which is up near Hollister. And 3 local citizens were killed. Well, after that, the authorities put an $8,000 reward on Tiburcio Vasquez's head. And they were trying to catch him. Well, in 1874, late 1874, they finally cornered him in LA. Actually, is near the La Brea tar pits at a ranch called Greek George's Ranch. He was a camel driver for the U.S. Army. Vasquez was found there hiding in a gunfight. He got wounded, and LA County Sheriff William Rowland captured him, put him on a steamer. They brought him back to San Francisco, and then down to San Jose for the trial. And the Los Angeles County Sheriff got the $8,000 reward. Now, his lieutenant, Clavejo Chavez, after the hanging of Vasquez, he reformed the gang, and they rode up over into the mining districts near Lone Pine, Ridgecrest, and the Panamint Range, and they were robbing stagecoaches and mines and and people, travelers there, until the posses got word that they were operating in there, and there's a $2,000 reward on Chavez's head. So Chavez decided to take the gang down to Tecate to get the posses off their trail, and thus they ended up in Campo.
Okay,
and then we come into the Campo gunfight.
Okay. So how did the gunfight actually start? I mean, did the Gaskills know anything about it prior to it, or
well, the
why did they
Gaskills,
decide to rob Campo as opposed to any other town?
well, basically there was no other town if you were near Tecate.
Yeah, that'll kind of get it right there.
Not on the American side, anyways. But Chavez had heard that there were mines opening up, really valuable mines, a lot of money, a lot of gold being moved around, a lot of mining payrolls in Sonora, Mexico. So he decided he was going to go over and investigate this, and he left his lieutenant, Cruz Lopez, in charge of the gang in Tecate, and he rode off by himself to Yuma and then on into Arizona to a place called Texas Hill. He got himself a job on a ranch in Texas Hill. And he would take off and drift across the border and scout out back trails and canyons and stuff, so he could complete his robbery in Mexico and then ride back into Arizona and keep the federales off of his trail. But so he rode off and he went to Yuma and then over to Arizona. Well, he was recognized by a childhood friend who knew there was a $2,000 reward on his head. So he got up a posse of bounty hunters, and they went and tried to capture Chavez. Chavez put up a fight and was killed. They brought the body to Yuma, Arizona, and the sheriff in Yuma held an inquest to find out whether or not this was really Claudio Chavez, the notorious murderer wanted in California. Well, because of the scars on Chavez's body and other identifications, the sheriff concluded that this was Chavez, and he released the body to the bounty hunters, who had to take the body to San Jose to collect the reward. Now, the state of California had posted the reward, $2,000 dead or alive. But when the bounty hunters showed up to collect, the state had never budgeted the money. And it took them 2 years to pay them off. And I had written down here, if I got real close, just give me a second. Well, they paid $2,140 something because they had to pay interest.
That sounds like California.
California government is about the same operating back then as it operates today. Well, Cruz Lopez was left in charge, you see, in Tecate. Well, he decided that they were going to do what Chavez had previously stated, is they're going to rob the small store at Campo. And there was only 2 gringo brothers there and an army telegraph operator to put up resistance. So that was the plan. December the 4th, 1875, which was a Saturday, at 10:30 in the morning, 6 bandits rode into Campo, and only one survived the gunfight.
Now, the Gaskill brothers may have been gringos, but I don't think they realized their background either.
Yes, you're right there. Now, Silas Gaskill, the older brother, he was I think he was 15 years older than Lumen. At 21 years of age in 1850, he headed west to California to join the miners in the gold rush. Well, he left Michigan, and he had no horse. He was walking. He had $17 and a rifle and whatever he could stash in his backpack. He met up with a wagon train heading west, and the wagon train said that for $200, he could stay with them for protection and walk to California. And Silas stated that he didn't have $200, but he would certainly pay the $200 with his first income that he could gain in California in the mines. Well, the wagon train accepted that, and Silas had stated that he was a good hunter and he could keep meat on the tables during the the long journey. Well, he was such a good hunter that the wagon train forgave him of his debt long before they got to California because he supplied so much meat. Now, when Silas got to California, he turns out he wasn't a very good miner. He didn't like being in the cold water all day. He wasn't very good at it, but he was a good hunter. And one day, a rancher came in and said grizzly bears are killing his cattle. And he said he'd give $50 to anyone who would get rid of that bear because there's a certain bear that was doing most of the killing. Now, Silas
Gotcha.
took him up on that. He said, I'll do that. I'll get rid of that bear for you for $50. Silas went out, and 2 days later, he come back with that bear, and he got his $50. Now, the
No,
miners were all sitting around. Now, they're paying big money for beef. Was very expensive in the mining camps in California back in 1849, 50, 51. And they said, Silas, what are you going to do with that bear? Silas, I don't know. They said, well, we'll buy it off you. We want to eat it. So they paid him $50 more for the bear. And Silas
nice.
decided, hey, this is better than mining. I'm going to hunt for the mines. So he started hunting, and by Silas's own reckoning, now this was in many newspaper articles because he was interviewed many times after the Campo gunfight. He claimed to have killed 302 bears, presumably mostly grizzlies, in California during the 1850s.
My
So
God,
Silas was certainly no pushover. You weren't going to walk in and intimidate a man who can shoot 300 grizzly bears.
that's true. So him and his brother pretty much, they could easily defend the town, just the two of them.
Yeah. And these banditos, they were used to pushing over storekeepers in small towns, and they attacked a lot of small towns. Tiburcio Vasquez, not only did he do the Tres Pinos robbery, but he robbed the town of King's Ferry in 1873, early 1873. And there they snuck into town at the break of day and tied up everybody. They tied up 35 or more people and began to sack the town when eventually some ranchers rode in who had rifles and realized what was going on, and they chased off these banditos. And that's how Chavez got one of the scars in his knee from a rifle shot that helped identify his body in Yuma 2 years later.
Wow. So let's get back to the actual gunfight at Campo now. Where did they come in? How did they do the attack? And where did it all start?
Okay, they rode in from Tecate, Mexico. If you look at a map, Tecate, Mexico is situated on the south side of the border, which is in Mexico, about 10 miles from Campo to the west. And Campo Creek runs along the border and then crosses the border into Tecate and then turns into the Tijuana River. So down there's Tecate. So the old road in the old days basically followed Campo Creek down into Tecate. And the road actually went through Tecate and then back on the American side to San Diego. So in 1875, if you traveled from Yuma to San Diego, you would have had to cross into Mexico for a short distance and into Tecate and then back across the border.
Now, is that road still available? I mean, is that road still close by to the store, or?
Well, as far as what? The border from here, from where I stand, the border is about a mile away.
So basically, what I'm saying is the road that they actually came into Campo with, isn't that right in front of the stone
Oh, yeah.
building?
It crosses right in front of the store. In fact, it's right down there. Larry's down there pruning a few bushes. But this is actually the highway, the only highway from Yuma, Arizona to San Diego in 1875.
Okay, so they would have come in this road, and
Yep.
then did they enter the store?
What they did, they sent on one man to scout ahead.
Gotcha.
And he was a local Tecate sheep herder who they picked up along the way in the cantinas, presumably in Tecate. And the Gasco brothers had seen him before, not like they knew him, but they had seen his face. So the banditos figured that sending him in wouldn't arouse any suspicion. So they sent him in first. And he was to scout out the area and come back and warn them if there was any force sizable enough to present a resistance to the robbery. Well, there wasn't, so he didn't report. He stayed in Campo overnight, and when the bandits showed up the next morning, he joined in on the gunfight. But he wasn't a hardcore criminal bandit like the ones who rode down from north. He was a sheep hoarder who just got talked into joining the bandits. Presumably, uh, he knew he didn't have much opportunity to ever buy a ranch and get enough money together. So joining the bandits was a way out of the poverty that existed on the Mexican side of the border back then. So
okay,
that
so
was probably his motivation for joining the Bandidos.
gotcha. So the bandits are more or less coming to town at this point.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to find out is they would have probably entered the store.
Cruz Lopez was the leader of the bandits. He took over the gang when they heard that Chavez had been killed in Yuma. And Chavez had stated before he left that when he gets back, we're going to rob the town of Campo. We're going to kill anybody who gets in our way, load everything on wagons that we need, and ride back across the border. That was the plan. After they heard about the death, Lopez took over the gang, assumed leadership, and decided the first thing they were going to do is rob the Campo, go to Campo and rob the town. So what he did is he brought 12 men to Campo. But he left 6 men outside of town with a wagon, and they were supposed to ride into town as soon as the shooting stopped. Well, the shooting was so ferocious that they turned and headed back to Mexico. They didn't even come into Campo. Now, the 6 that rode into Campo, only one survived the Campo gunfight. One was killed immediately, and others will get into what happened to them as we get into this story. But Cruz's plan was he sent one in to scout ahead. The scout was in Campo. He sent 2 other men in to take on Silas the blacksmith. And the other 3 went to the store to rob the storekeeper. When Cruz Lopez got to the steps of the store and looked around, he could see that they were unaware that there was a robbery going to take place. So he smiled and he gave the signal to the other 2 to go ahead and take on the blacksmith. And they walked into the store. Well, the other 2 had a Henry rifle that they had stolen off of a beekeeper a couple days later that they murdered. And that's also in the book. And they shot at Silas with a rifle and hit him in the arm. Well, Silas ducked into the blacksmith shop and already had a loaded 12-gauge shotgun. And when the bandit with the Henry rifle stepped in front of the doorway, Silas let him have it, and he died before he hit the ground.
Now, wasn't his brother shot at the store, though?
Yes. At the same time, the other 3 bandits are going into the store. And Lumen Gaskill was the storekeeper. He was, at this point, unaware that anything was going on. Cruz walks up to the counter and says, "Good day, senor. Could I see that rope?" Because there was a coil of rope hanging up behind Lumen and behind the counter. So Lumen turned to get that rope. The bandits pulled their guns. Lumen turns around and sees that they're about to be robbed and yells murder. His brother Silas hears this at the same time and looks up just as the bandit outside with the Henry rifle is getting ready to shoot him. And that's probably what saved Silas's luck, because he turned to go to the blacksmith shop. Well, Lumen yells murder, and 2 of the bandits leaped over the counter and grabbed Lumen by the arms. And Cruz Lopez calmly puts a pistol to Lumen's chest and pulls the trigger. Lumen knew he was dead. Lumen thought, bullet's going to go right through my heart. The bandits actually had knocked Lumen down and were holding him down on the floor behind the counter. Well, Lumen had one arm around one of the posts that holding up the counter. And just as Cruz Lopez smiled and pulled that trigger, he jerked on that post with his arm, and that moved his body just enough so that that bullet, instead of going through his heart, went through his left lung, the top of the left lung, and come out his back.
Now, is that counter? Could you take us to the counter?
Say again?
Can you take us to that counter where he was shot
Okay.
at?
Yes, we can. Uh,
That
but we
it's
can't. No. Okay, let's explain this first. We can take you into the stone store, and we're going to. We want to show you. This is the museum. I'll put it back on. This is a museum that was built in 1885 by the Gaskill brothers. Now, the store that was robbed was a wooden structure, and it was, if you can see the railroad tracks, right behind it, there's a little silver box that looks like a telephone company box, or maybe it has something to do with the railroad signals. But anyways, the stone store was right about there. Now, Campo Creek was over where the tracks are, and it actually straddled the creek. And they had a trap door in the store where they could lower perishables and other goods into the creek. They had it dammed up so there was plenty of water in it. And when they needed to sweep the floor, they would just sweep the dirt into the creek and it would float down the creek. But 10 years later, after the gunfight, the Gaskills built this fortress, which is the Campo Stone Store Museum, Gaskill Brothers Stone Store Museum today. And it is run by the Mountain Empire Historical Society. And it is full of all kinds of goodies. Historical artifacts from the day. Campo has a lot more history to it than just the Gaskill gunfight. We can look at a kitchen from the 1870s, all set up. Sewing machine. We get to a more modern telephone on the wall, 1910s. We have a nice library of nice old historical writings and
but
stuff.
Bryon, where was the counter?
Counter. Here's a counter
There
here.
we go. Now, in their day, was the counter glass or was it a wooden counter at the time? Or
You know, history really doesn't ever record exactly what was in the wooden store, but I can show you the diagram. Right here is a
there we
model.
go.
Model of how Campo was in 1875. And if I can point out here, this here is the store that was robbed. And right here is where I'm standing today. This is where the stone store is built into these rocks here. So here. So you also had the blacksmith shop. You had Lumen Gaskill's house. You had the new hotel. This was the Campo Hotel, built brand new, 1 month old in 1875. And over here is the mill and barns and stuff. We had a small mill in Campo. So that was the layout in 1875 right there.
This is awesome. So you can more or less, if you go to Campo and you visit the store, you're going to be able to see more or less what it was like in the 1800s when Gaskill was there. I mean, you can still walk the grounds and see via the diorama where the places actually were. But meanwhile, you get a real taste or flavor for what it was like to be back in the 1800s via the museum.
Yeah, you can. And upstairs, Campo became Camp Lockett right around the turn of the century, which was a military post. And it was very important to help guard the border, even up until World War II. And it was the last home of the Buffalo Soldiers, which still has, they have upstairs is the military museum. And there's all kinds of artifacts and information about that there.
Cool.
Very
So,
interesting.
so Gaskill gets shot. He drops down through the trap door. His brother is at the barn. And from what I read, he's basically confronted, but he shoots somebody dead on the spot, and then he runs to the back of the barn. Can you talk us through that?
Okay, Silas Gaskill. He got shot in the arm, in the shoulder, got wounded. And then he falls down on the floor, grabs a shotgun, and as the bandit with the rifle stepped in front of the door, he let him have it. That bandit was dead. Silas got up off of the floor and scurried out the back door. Now, another bandit, seeing the other guy gets shot in the front door, he runs around the back of the building and basically bumps into Silas Gaskill out there and goes for his gun. Silas wounds him, real bad wound, and he crawls into the bushes and hides. Silas goes back. Now, this was a muzzle loading shotgun, had 2 shots. And Silas was out of ammo at this point and does not actively participate in the gunfight after this. Now, his brother Lumen has been shot. He's behind the counter in the store. He has blood coming out of his mouth. The bandits think he's dead. They raid the store and they get sacks and they throw everything they can think of into the sacks and they head outside. Well, outside there was a sheep herder who worked on a sheep ranch. His name was Frenchie. That's what they called him. No one knows his real name, but everyone in Campo called him Frenchie. And he was coming into town to get the mail for his boss, Senor Yonda, who owned the ranch. Well, upon arriving in Campo and hearing the gunshots, he realized there was bandits in town and they were robbing the store. And he takes out his 6-shooter, gets off his horse, and starts shooting at the bandits. Now, the bandit leader, Cruz Lopez, he gets wounded in the neck, really bad wound. But one of his other bandits shoots down Frenchie, who later died of his wounds. They go outside. Now, at this point, when they're outside, Lumen in the store wakes up, grabs a shotgun he had hidden, crawls to the door, sees a bandito walk by, shoots him in the gut. He falls down. A moment later, another bandit came into his view. He shoots him and wounds him. And he crawled off in the bushes. So now you have Cruz Lopez wounded in the neck. He decides that he no longer wants anything to do with Campo, gets on his horse, grabbed the Henry rifle that was laying on the ground that the other bandit had killed, that Silas couldn't get to, by the way. He was more or less pinned down in the blacksmith shop. So Cruz gets on his horse. One other bandit who didn't get wounded jumps on a horse. The other bandit that Lumen had shot, he's gut shot. He tries to crawl on a horse, can't get on the horse. The other bandit helps him on the horse. They ride on out of town. The wounded bandit falls off, crawls to Cruz. Cruz, amigo, help me. I can't ride. And Cruz says, I got some help for you. Gets off his horse, leans him against a tree and shoots him in the head. And that's where his body was found, leaning against a tree with a bullet in his head. So the 2 bandits that crawled off into the bushes, they didn't go very far. And after the gunfight, townspeople started showing up in Campo, and they were quickly rounded up. And they were brought to the grist mill, and they were chained down to the floor, so they couldn't go anywhere. Well, Doc Millard was called because of Lumen's wounds, because Campo had a telegraph office in Campo, and there was a telegraph officer here who claimed to have shot it out with the bandits, but there's nobody that can collaborate them claims, and it's believed that he made them up after the gunfight just to make himself look like, that he helped defend the town. But anyways, he got on the telegraph San Diego. The sheriff got up a posse, but Doc Millard found out about it right off, and he got on a horse and started riding to Campo. He made it to Campo 50 miles in 12 hours, changing horses along at the stage stop relay stations. So anyways, and the sheriff, San Diego County Sheriff, Nicholas Hunsaker, wasn't far behind him. And when Doc Millard got to Campo, Lumen was brought in his house, and he was laid on the floor originally, and Lumen's wife said, no, got to get him in bed. And Lumen said, no, just leave me here. No sense in getting the bed sheets all bloody. I'm done for. And they said, no, nonsense. They got him in the bed. Well, Doc Millard got there and checked out Lumen and said, only 1 in 100 men could survive something like this. But not only did Lumen survive, he survived with no ill effects of the gunshot whatsoever. And
those are the old tough guys.
He lived to be a ripe old age.
Yeah, those are the old tough guys. There's not a lot of those around today.
Both Gaskills lived until 1914.
So of all the bandits and all the people involved, I know they call it the bloodiest gunfight. How many actually survived? How many died? And how many died of their wounds from this battle?
it would be a stretch to say Campo was the bloodiest gunfight in the West, of course. I mean, I would say, but this has uniqueness to not only Campo but the historical uh, California history, because these banditos, they can be traced back to Joaquin Murrieta, who in 1849 started raiding and killing the early settlers and miners who flocked to the California gold rush. And through different bandits, there's a linkage right back to Joaquin Murrieta. So these Californios banditos have been raiding and killing Californians since 1849, and in 1875, it ended with the Campo gunfight. So that end of that era ended that day, December the 4th, 1875, right here in Campo, California. So that's very significant in California's history, and thus makes it a more significant gunfight in Old West history and lore. Now, how many were people? There were 8 casualties in the Campo gunfight. 6 people died as a result of their wounds or died outright. 2 of the bandits that were found hiding in the bushes after the gunfight, they were taken into custody, and like I was saying, they were chained to the mill in Campo store. And the sheriff rode out with his posse, found out that the other 2 bandits had escaped across the border, so they couldn't chase them. Found the dead body of the one leaning up against the tree that Cruz Lopez had shot on his way out to the border. Came back, and Sheriff Hunsaker took charge of the bandits, put young Jimmy Keys in charge of them to watch him over the night. And the next morning, they were going to put them on horses and bring them back to San Diego. But Doc Millard was telling them, there's no way you're going to get these alive to San Diego. But the sheriff said, no, we're taking them anyways. But during the night, Jimmy Keys found a bottle of whiskey that somebody had conveniently left. And he was a young guy. And he started drinking that whiskey. Well, he passed out. And the next morning, the 2 banditos that were wounded were found hanging at the famous Campo hanging tree, using the very same rope that Cruz Lopez had asked to see in the store originally. And it's presumed, nobody knows for sure who did the hangings. It's presumed that the Gaskills may have something to do with it, and that's quite possibly true. But it's also possible that the sheriff didn't want to tote these wounded banditos all the way back to San Diego, and possibly he had something to do with it. Now, the official story when they got back to San Diego, because everyone wanted to know, was that there were some cowboys riding by and heard about this gunfight, and they rode into town in the middle of the night and lynched these bandits. But did they leave Jimmy Keys a bottle of whiskey? I don't think so. So, I left it in my novel. I left it to the readers to make up their own mind, as much as everyone has to do. Silas Gaskill was interviewed many times over the years after the Campo gunfight, and he would never. Two statements everybody wanted to know. One, who tipped off Silas that the bandits were coming to Campo? Because somebody did. Silas just said it was a Mexican fella and would not disclose his name. And who lynched the bandits? Who actually was the one that lynched them? Them 2 questions were never answered. But Luman Gaskill's grandmother was interviewed in the 1950s. Granddaughter was interviewed in the 1950s. She was fairly elderly at that point in time. And she laughed when the interviewer came up to that question, and she just stated, there was many a man that was hung at the Campo hanging tree.
Oh my God!
Just them 2 banditos.
Now, more or less, that tree is still there today. Is there a sign on it?
The tree fell over in a storm, I believe, in the 1970s, and the trunk was brought over here to the museum, and is in pretty bad shape today. We've tried to keep a piece of it around for historical reasons, but the grandchildren of that hanging tree are growing today over at the site, which is only a couple hundred yards from the museum here.
So after the gunfight's done, after everything's over and the town gets back to normal, just out of curiosity, how long did the Gaskills stay in town? How long did they live? Did they have a fruitful life afterwards?
Well, we can go on and on about that. Even though The banditos were the bad guys, and the Gaskill brothers defended themselves. So during the Campo gunfight, they're kind of the good guys. But the Gaskills did not wear white hats, and there was lots of controversy about them too. There was both were wanted for murder in Northern California, and there was other deaths attributed to them that we really don't have time to go into. Really, what our viewers would really want to do is come here to Campo, to the Stone Store Museum. I'm going to bring you over here to the director of the museum, the president of the Mountain Empire Historical Society. This is Larry Johnson, and he's going to tell you a little more about the Stone Store and the Gaskills, how they ended up.
Cool, thank you.
I'm Larry Johnson, president of the Mountain Empire Historical Society. And so the building that Bryon has been telling you about was built in 1885. In addition to that, that's one major topic, one major event that took place. But there were lots of other things going on here too. So lots of other history in it. One of the significant things, you'll see a case right here, has quite a few Kumeyaay Indian items in it, baskets and so forth. That's just one piece of the history. Down towards the end, you might scroll down there and take a look. We have a saddle of some of the hooks. They were here, some of the early pioneers. If you look back up at the shelves here, those are set up very similar to what the store looked like in 1899. So we have lots of cultural history here of the Indians, the pioneers. Upstairs, we have a lot of history about the military that was here, primarily in World War II, the Buffalo Soldiers and so forth. That's a whole story by itself. So at this particular location, we're lucky to have this really historic building, a lot of historic items in it. We like to have as many viewers as we can, get as much advertising, as many members as we can. We publish a quarterly newsletter like this. And we delve into historic items all about San Diego County. If they go out of the county and out of the state, we trace that also. We have just recently published a book right here called May They Rest in Peace. And Cherry Diefenbach is the author, but what that resulted from was we have taken over 2 boot hills here in the area that started in the 1880s. And many of the original pioneers and settlers that came in here and homesteaded are in those boot hills. And so we've renovated it. And also this book researches the occupants of those graveyards, and it tells where they lived, and how they ended up in the graveyard. And it was a tough place to live. There was lots of murder and mayhem.
What about the dead body that's presumably in the walls?
Well, Bryon brings up a sort of a hearsay point in that
Captain Hansen.
Captain Hansen lived down in Mexico and came through here with some money, met the Gaskills, knew the Gaskills, but the Gaskills also knew that he had some money on him. And so he disappeared, the body disappeared, the money disappeared, and as I understand it, the buggy ended up in the Gaskills' barn, and some of the money ended up in Gaskill's safe. So a lot of circumstantial evidence. As Bryon had said, they sort of operated on both sides of the law from everything that we can tell. So just in general, a very historic building, and so we try and capture that and keep it alive. We're open on Saturday and Sunday, and with docents, we have a very significant archive upstairs. We also need help in that to help file the information out, get it into a database. So we look forward to having volunteers, helpers, donations, and we keep coming up with more. There's more history here than we have researchers and writers to really publish it and put it out. So if you're interested and so forth, you can contact us through John there.
I'll put a link for the website. I also want to say personally that I've been to that store at least 3 or 4 times, and it's incredible. Not only all the history that's inside the store, but the surroundings of the store, the road itself, anything and everything around Campo, to me, is just one of those really cool kind of a weekend trip type of thing that you can go out and enjoy. Bryon,
Here's something I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to see.
Okay.
This is my novel, Campo, the Forgotten Gunfight. And it can be bought and found on Amazon or on Kindle. But if you want a personalized autographed copy, you can go to campogunfight@gmail.com and contact me personally. And for $20, I will autograph, personalize, and mail you out a copy ASAP.
Plus they're available here.
And they're also available here at the Stone Store. So if you stop by the Stone Store, come right in, and they're already signed too, I believe. If they aren't,
and you better buy 2 books.
yeah.
Awesome. Hey guys, I'd like to thank you both. This was incredible. I think it went by very well. I'm really glad that you had the time and the ability to kind of go through all this. I know doing live shows could be tough from time to time, especially with the technical side of it. But I think this went really well. I really, really, really appreciate everything that you've done. Larry, we're not done with Campo. I'm sure we're going to get a hold of you at least 3 more times to start talking about some of the other history and sharing the wealth that's around the Campo area.
Okay, very good.
Well, thank you.
But once again, thank you guys.
It's a pleasure to also talk about history. We love to get the word out. And
you got it.
We're historians, and it's what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Very much. Bye.
Okay, so that ends today's show, and I just want to thank everybody for the comments and all the reactions that you had. I really appreciate it. Please tell your friends, neighbors, others, and share this as much as you like. Get the word out, because we can only get better if there's more people. I want to do more shows. I want to do better shows. But I think today's went by really well. And I thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.